Okay, so we are back for part two, and we're going to talk about flood. Flood is so important. If you have not dealt with having or not having flood insurance, this you're going to want to watch this. So let's jump in. So coming out of Florida, obviously flood is a big deal there, but Gary and I met in a class a while back, and he went into detail about because we had a lot of flooding here in Tennessee. What was that, 2 or 3 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, what are when they buy people? We have a lot of creeks here, a lot of water, lakes, but it's the water in the rivers that rise. Obviously, it causes flood problems, and there was all kinds of conversation in that class about how they bought something that was so far away they didn't think, or the elevation certificate said it was fine and then it wasn't. And so this is really important here in Tennessee as well. So, and let's just start about flood. What do we need to know?
Yeah, flood insurance is it's something that's kind of underlying, like you mentioned. A lot of times people might find this perfect house. It's just the right price. It looks great. And then you dive into it and it's like, why hasn't this sold? And it's because it's usually in a floodplain or something's going on there where it's prone to flooding. The reason for that is because flood insurance is separate from traditional home insurance, and therefore it's a separate premium. And depending on where you are, again, elevation certificate, how close you are to the water source, it can be very expensive. It can go from a few $100s a year to several $1,000s a year, depending on how prone you are to flooding.
On top of your homeowners.
On top of your homeowner insurance, exactly.
So if you don't know this, if you don't, for whatever reason, realize that you're near water and you get flooded, and all you had was homeowners insurance, you're not covered, basically.
That is correct. Yes, okay. They actually define flooding as a raindrop that comes from the sky, hits the ground, and then intrudes into the house. That's considered flooding. So anytime the outside source water that comes into the home is considered flooding. If you have a bursted pipe or overflowing toilet or something like that, traditional insurance is going to cover that. That's not considered flooding. But if the water intrudes from the outside in, it is considered flooding, and therefore you would need flood insurance to cover those. We had several people that were displaced due to flooding recently in East Tennessee with the hurricane that came through Florida. Yeah. And that's a higher elevation area out there, and a lot of people think, well, why would I need flooding? I'm in a higher elevation area, and some of them unfortunately didn't have coverage when the waters came through there and did such catastrophic damage. So that's something that is very, very important when you're looking to buy a house in Middle Tennessee or any part of Tennessee. As far as that goes, you want to be sure and ask the questions: is it in a flood zone? And if it is, you want to get the elevation certificate and find out if you do need flood insurance or not.
Okay, yeah. So as an agent, we can help you find the flood zone, check the flood zone map and everything. But really, as a scenario looks like, we go look at a house, it looks iffy, or because there's water nearby or creek nearby or whatever, then I call Gary, or my buyer calls Gary, and you can look into it farther because you're the one that's going to be insuring it. So that's where you really want to get through all the steps. That we can always look up flood maps. I know in Florida flood maps change all the time, so it doesn't like that's helpful. It gives you some idea, but it's not the end all be all. The insurance agent is the end all be all, and they tell you how much do you need. So let's talk about what an elevation certificate is and how do we get that.
Yeah, so elevation certificate is pretty much what it sounds like. It determines the elevation of the property, and therefore it can determine whether or not it is in an area that's prone to flooding or not. You could literally have say a river bottom that has this beautiful home built in this beautiful meadow there, and the whole bottom is in a flood zone. That would require you to have flood insurance. But when they built the house, they actually built it on higher elevation. They built the dirt up, built a higher elevation, and therefore it may be out of the flood map. And so you may not either need flood insurance, or you may not pay as high a premium as you would be if you were in, say, the lower part of that bottom. So the elevation certificates are very, very important. They basically determine the height of where the home sets and how prone it is to flooding.
So who does that? Like when we get into, I know in Florida things are different, so that's why I'm in Tennessee, guys. Now I know I talk about Florida a lot just because I was there for so many years. I'm newer to Tennessee, so all of this I'm kind of learning as I go here, even though I have a ton of experience dealing with all of this. every state is different. So for those of you that are moving in, how do we go about getting an elevation? We call elevation cert.
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of different ways that one can obtain something like that. If you're buying an existing property, sometimes you can literally contact the Register of Deeds in your local county and find out what would have been on the original survey of the property and get the elevation certificate at that time. You can have a structural engineer come in and redo it again. Again, you can contact your insurance agent and he can run some information through the flood insurance companies, find the map and zone it's in and give you a good ballpark. And sometimes there'll be elevation certificates attached to that specific address that they can pull as well. But really your best bet is to do your research on the property, contact your local county office and find out everything that's been recorded in the county about it being in a floodplain, what the elevation certificate was at the time the home was built, particularly if it was built within the last 10 to 15 years. A lot of times they have great records for that. If it was something that was built 50 years ago, probably your best bet would be to contact a structural engineer and have them look into it and make sure that you're not in a flood zone.
Okay. Do you have a ballpark on cost on that? Like just
they can vary depending on the area. They can be very costly sometimes.
Just to get the elevation certificate.
Well, to get the elevation certificate, it's not a big deal. But if you had to have a structural engineer come out to actually redo it, or have a surveyor come out and resurvey everything, those can be very costly. But a lot of times it doesn't cost anything to just contact your local county office and just say, hey, what information do you have about this property? Do you have anything? Do you have an elevation certificate? Do you have anything at all on this? And that doesn't really cost you anything at all to do that. So it's just a little bit of legwork and doing some research, but you can find out just about anything you need to know when it comes to purchasing those type of properties if you just put a little bit of effort in it.
Okay. So for our second homeowners, our investors, we have so many Airbnbs here in Tennessee and especially in our Nashville area. Is it true? So I've heard that a second homeowner or an investor is not eligible for FEMA payments. I see you smiling. So after a disaster. So does that mean it's more important for them to have flood? Is that even true that they can't receive the payments because they're not living in it?
Yes, all the way around. Yes. So it is true that FEMA money is usually set for the primary dwelling. So they don't do secondary homes. That is something that's just a stipulation they put out there. Don't really know rhyme or reason, but they did. And for that reason, it's very important that you do look at having flood insurance on a particular property like that. We have a lot of people that have lake houses, right? They'll have Tennessee River houses, things of that nature. Well, again, depending on the elevation they were built at, they could be in a flood zone. And if they are, you may live in Davidson County, but have a river house in Humphreys County. And if you were to have a disaster, you're going to want flood insurance on the Humphreys County home to take care of that, because FEMA's not going to cover anything there on that, what they call seasonal dwelling or secondary dwelling. Okay. So it's always important to do that. And usually it's not that expensive to get those type of coverages on those homes. Again, if you're not building right on the banks of the river, so to say, it's pretty affordable. It can be a few $100s extra a year, but it's very well worth it if you've got several $100,000 investment in that particular vacation home.
Okay. So very different for those of you coming from Florida, where you're getting flooded by the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic, whatever side you're on, versus a creek. Whereas, I mean, in North Carolina, it was massive. It was unimaginable what happened to them. So, and I know so many people there had no idea that it could ever get to where it is. So I say lean on the side of caution, especially if it's a more affordable, but down in Florida where you have those massive floods coming in, where they're just covering a whole area because it's coming off of the Gulf from a hurricane. Those policies we've heard they're pretty outrageous.
Yes, a lot of people don't even insure those because of just what you said. They're extremely expensive, and not only that, but there's only a handful of carriers that will even take on that risk because the odds of them flooding are pretty high. Okay. And here in Tennessee, we don't really have that problem. Obviously, we don't have hurricanes, but we don't have any major water sources that we have strictly had catastrophic flooding to really worry about. And so I've never had a property that was ever denied because it was too close to a water source or was just constantly prone to flooding. Usually we can find some way to give you some sort of coverage on those, even if you were to buy a house or build a home on a lake or water source in Tennessee.
Okay. So let's talk about polybutylene pipe.
Okay.
I have dealt with we refer to it as poly, it's polybutylene. It's a pipe they put in I believe it was the 70s and the early 80s, like a plastic pipe that I know this is not a sexy conversation, but poly can do a lot of damage, and from my experience down in Florida, it can be expensive to insure. So the thing with poly is that I believe it's the connections sort of erode over time, and then they cause leaking within your walls and your cabinetry and everything. So they can be massively destructive if they're in throughout the whole home. Generally, I believe they run gray or like a bluish. Don't quote me on that. I'm going to also interview a contractor, so we'll get some more info on poly. But how do you guys deal with poly when you have a home that has poly pipe in it? What is that? Is that insurable? Are you requiring it to be replaced?
It is insurable with Farm Bureau Insurance of Tennessee. Now, some carriers do look at those, and they may deny coverage or exclude coverage on certain things. That pipe is actually pretty common in Tennessee, and the reason for that is because a lot of the rural properties in Tennessee don't have a municipal water source, and so they have wells. And so back in the day, a lot of those pipes were used to take the well water to the house. So it's not uncommon to see those
inside the home.
Actually, we go from the well source to the home.
To the home, yes, but they're not technically inside the home. Then
yes, there are some, but not as many. Not as much. More copper lines, but there are a few. What I would tell somebody is I wouldn't shy away from that home if you found that perfect deal because it has those pipes in that. Any pipe under pressure has the risk of bursting or being faulty at any time. And so whether it is copper or PEX or PVC, they all have that potential to burst. Now, poly has kind of got a bad rap of them being prone to that, but with anything over age and time and wear and tear, it can be compromised. So we can insure those if that is the situation. But the best thing to do, if it is possible, is to remove that plumbing and replace it with something more modern like PEX or PVC or something of that nature. But I wouldn't shy away from buying my dream home, so to say, because it has that.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing. I've had numerous clients over the years that have dealt with it in certain areas where it was just really common.
Yeah.
But, and some went to replace it. So I think the bid we got, it's been quite a few years. It was like 1,000 square foot condo. It was about $6,000 to replace it. It's not cheap to replace it. They're taking out your sheetrock, your insulation, all of that is coming out and then getting redone, retaped and textured, repainted. So then I've had other clients that choose to keep it and they're able to get insurance. It wasn't a big deal. They don't want to tear up the walls. And it kind of goes both ways. But personally, yeah, I would never pass up a house just because it had poly. I would get a bid and try to get some off of the price for sure.
Absolutely.
If I decide I want to take, and I think another townhome we did, I want to say the bid was $15,000 to do the poly, and it was a much bigger townhome. So it's a substantial amount, and it's worth getting a bid going in. If your inspector, usually your inspector is the one to catch it, get a bid and ask for that off the price as you're going in, just in case you decide you want to replace it down the road or, credit it back at closing, however you want to do that. So let's talk about Tennessee roof age. I know in Florida that for a while they were like, if it's 10 years or older, you're replacing it. And then legislation was passed, and I believe now it's 15 years or older. Does Tennessee have anything like that? Are we dealing with roof issues?
Not that I'm aware of. I've never been told that. I've never had an issue where there's ever been a problem with the age of a roof. Now, I will say that, and we touched on it a little bit before, that a shingle has a lifespan like anything else, right? It's a man-made product, and so if you have a 20-year shingle on that, and you're 30 years into that 20-year shingle, you're probably going to need to replace that roof. Not saying it's not insurable, but a lot of companies may exclude that roof due to the age of the roof. In my line of work, I have inspected, literally thousands of homes, and I have seen some roofs that had a 5-year-old roof on it that looks like it had been on for 20 years, depending on the foliage and things that fall on the roof and, just overall care. Then again, I've seen roofs that's been on for 20 years that look like they were put on 10 years ago. I mean, they were just very well kept. They didn't have the trees and the debris blowing on those as well. So all of that factors in. There's not necessarily an age limit saying if the roof is over 20 years old, we can insure it. You've got to replace it, but it could be depreciated or possibly excluded in an insurance claim if the lifespan of the shingles have been exhausted.
Okay. So I've heard from some roofing contractors here in Tennessee that there's a lot of hail damage. How is that covered under your policy? Is that just under a standard homeowner's policy? Is that an extra rider?
Great question. Under most carriers in Tennessee, it's a standard coverage. Most of the standard perils, as we call it, the wind, fire, hail, things of that nature, act of God, they're covered under traditional homeowners policies. Farm Bureau Insurance doesn't charge a separate deductible or anything like that. They're all it's considered a peril that is factored into the policy. Other carriers, they may charge more for a wind damage or hail damage. They may charge you a higher deductible for such. It just depends on it, but there's no exclusions for most carriers for that type of coverage because again we get a lot of thunderstorms in Middle Tennessee. We have basically 2 storm seasons, 2 tornado seasons, as we call it, one usually in the spring and one in the late fall. We are prone to tornadic activity, and with that does come hailstorms and windstorms and things of that nature. And so most carriers in Tennessee factor that in, and they don't exclude that kind of peril.
Is that same for the car? Like
yes.
Your car is sitting out. I know I was in Texas with some girlfriends. We had a rental car. A crazy storm came through. Some of us landed late. It was a big ordeal. And the rental car was parked outside and it got hail damage. And so we had to, anyways, I went back. They were fine with it. They were like, no, whatever, the insurance still, and it was eye-opening though. So we get hail in Florida, but not very rare. Like this up here, I've seen a fair amount.
Yeah, so we had a catastrophic hailstorm here. May the 26th of 2024 was probably the worst I had ever seen that hit Middle Tennessee, and we literally had some clients that would take it and put it in the freezer, and they had softball size hail. It was 3-4 inch hail. Yeah, here right here in Middle Tennessee, and one gentleman actually told me, he says, "Well, I brought this in because I didn't think you'd believe me." But it did catastrophic damage, like you said. It damaged windshields, obviously dented the cars, but roofs as well were damaged to that. But there was no exclusions moving forward on those automobiles or those homes from such a peril like that. It just was one of those freak storms, let's say, that popped up, and we were prepared for it, and we took care of our clients, and we're not going to hold that against anyone because, again, there's nothing you can do about those type of things.
Yeah. I mean, and nowhere is perfect. If you're looking for perfection. I came from the Pacific Northwest that had earthquakes, and then Idaho, Montana that had wildfires, and then Florida that had hurricanes, and I'm in Tennessee with tornadoes. It's super exciting.
That's right.
Let's talk about is tornado like, I know with hurricane coverage in Florida, there's all different kinds they consider water damage. Like, did the roof come in and then you got water damage, whatever. So is that kind of the same from a tornado? Like, what if a tornado comes through? And it's very rare, guys. Like, I don't want to freak anybody out here. I mean, you get a lot of warning. You really do. Like, you get warning. The storm is coming in like a week before. And then your phones are going off like, hey, some has been seen in this area. So take cover, whatever, and they do damage some homes, but it's not anything like it is in Florida where a whole area is just wiped out for a year. So.
Yeah. Tennessee does a great job, and I think it is a testament to the Weather Service. National Weather Service does a great job of warning people, and they have adequate time to take cover in the event of tornadic activity. And a lot of times they'll let you know days in advance. Hey, we've got a storm event coming, and you can kind of prepare for it. But usually, it's very rare we have tornadoes. When we do, they can be catastrophic. I mean, it's one of those things where a tornado, it usually just blows your house and you've got just massive destruction. But it's gone as quickly as it comes in. And to your point, it's not something that lingers for days and days like a hurricane would, where they may literally set over the coast for a few days before it passes, and it's just pounding you for 3 days. You got this horrible damage. Tornadoes are very destructive. They can cause destruction to property and life. Unfortunately, they're a very dangerous thing. But again, most houses built in this state will have an option for storm shelters that you can get depending on the area you're in. Some builders actually come now equipped with those. Houses are built very, very strong to withstand certain wind ratings. So it's not something to be worried about. It is, to your point, nobody's perfect, right? No perfect place to live, but we do get some tornadic activity here. When that does happen, usually if it's a total loss, we're not going to nitpick on, well, this was caused by this, and this looks like it's water damage, or this is hail damage. In the event of a total loss like that, we're Farm Bureau insurance anyways, we're just paying the claim out. I mean, people go through enough in those disastrous times. We're gonna take care of you, and we're gonna pay out that claim and get your rebuild process started back again. And most carriers do that. They don't haggle a lot with those type of things because, again, when a tornado comes and hits a neighborhood, it's ripping roofs off. Sometimes it's leveling homes. It can literally move your house into a different zip code, so to say. I mean, they literally have just destruction that just goes everywhere. So we don't haggle with that a lot. We just pay out the claim and move on.
Okay. All right. So there's no extra rider for
not
top of your
usually.
Homeowners or anything like that.
Not with those. Not with Farm Bureau Insurance Tennessee. There's not. Now other carriers may have a little bit of a different endorsement for wind or hail or something like that, but most carriers don't.
Okay. So what about the car? If you had we had some tornadoes come through last year. A friend of mine, it was in Columbia, Tennessee, which is about an hour plus south of Nashville. The part of the chimney came off his neighbor's and hit his roof and caused some flood or some leaking. So what if debris from something else hits your car? Is your car is that?
Yeah, it's covered. It's again covered under the comprehensive. There's nothing you really can do about that. Because again, you mentioned a great point. The debris from a tornadic event can be as catastrophic as a direct hit, and you may literally find boards and shingles at your place that were blown from blocks away because it is so destructive. It's not going to affect your car insurance. This should be paid out under comprehensive. Again, it's an act of God, act of nature, and there's nothing really can be done about that. Same thing if something was a blow off from someone else's house and hits your house. Your homeowner's insurance is going to take care of that as well. It's because it's all part of the storm event itself.
Okay, got it. So as far as down Florida, we need the wind mitt. I know a lot of Floridians. That's why I keep mentioning Florida, because y'all are coming from down there where you've got similar things you know about, you've been dealing with. So we need a wind mitigation down there and a 4-point inspection. Is that something we need here in Tennessee?
You do not. You do not need that in Tennessee. No. There's nothing where you're going to have an inspector come out and say, I think you need to have shutters to go over your windows or something of that nature in the event of a windstorm to keep debris from blowing them out, or you need more secure doors or something like that. There's nothing really regulating in Tennessee for wind mitigation.
Okay. So that's it. You're just basically getting a homeowner's policy, flood if you need it. Is there any other riders, anything else you want to mention?
No, the only thing that Tennessee does have a slight risk of is we do have the option to have earthquake insurance if you need that. West Tennessee does set on a fault line that comes out of Missouri. And occasional they'll get some rumbles over there. Nothing that's ever been devastating. But there's always that chance. And so we actually offer flood and earthquake insurance at Tennessee Farm Bureau Insurance because we take care of all Tennesseans. We're the largest insurance carrier in the state of Tennessee. And so we do have that option for people who just want that peace of mind. There's no immediate risk in Middle Tennessee or East Tennessee of earthquake, but there are a couple of fault lines in the state that could cause some damage potentially. So there's always an option there. You can get earthquake insurance if you feel that's something you would need.
Okay. So basically, we've covered the gist of it. I know it's a long video, guys. There's so much to know when it comes to insurance, no matter what state you're in. So, is there anything else we missed, or you think we should talk
No,
about?
I think you did a great job. You
Covered.
covered about everything. The biggest risk we have in Tennessee are usually wind damage and hail damage, and it's just par for the course. Again, we have a couple of storm seasons here, and they're short and usually not too terribly bad. So.
And otherwise, it's amazing. I really do love it here. So I'm very happy I made the move. But well, thank you, Gary, so much for doing this.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it. This is a ton of information and the information people need. Like this is, whether versus calling your insurance guy and going through all this, now they can just watch the video. So,
Sure. No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, well, so if you guys have any questions for me or for Gary, both of our information is going to be linked below in the description section. So you can reach out to him if you're thinking about moving here, you already moved here, you just want to get a quote on your car or your house. And of course, give me a call if you have any questions about real estate, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.